The classroom was huge and circular, with seats going up like steps around a central stage. Students from dozens of different worlds sat in those seats, their various shapes and sizes making the room look like a colorful puzzle. Some had 4 arms, others had blue skin, and a few even had tentacles instead of legs. But they all had one thing in common. They were the smartest beings from their home planets. Taeho Kim sat in the middle row, trying not to stand out. He was the only human in the entire Galactic Academy, and that made him feel strange every single day. His black hair and brown eyes looked boring compared to the glowing crystals growing from his classmate's head, or the silver scales covering another student's arms. Professor Velthar walked onto the stage. She was tall and thin, with purple skin, and 3 eyes that could look in different directions at the same time. Her voice was smooth and calm as she spoke to the class. "Today, we will learn about the most dangerous creatures in our galaxy," she said. "These beasts come from what we call Deathworlds, planets so harsh that only the strongest and deadliest animals can survive there." A big screen appeared behind her, showing a picture of a creature that looked like a giant spider made of black metal. Its legs were as sharp as swords, and red light glowed from its many eyes. "This is a Nexaxi from the planet Pyros," Professor Velthar explained. "Pyros is a world of active volcanoes and rivers of melted rock. The Nexaxi has crystal spines that can cut through steel. It hunts by hiding in lava pools and jumping out to grab its prey." The alien students leaned forward in their seats, some making notes on their electronic tablets. Crix, a student with gray skin and 4 arms, raised one hand. "Professor, what makes the Nexaxi so efficient at hunting?" he asked. "Excellent question, Crix," the professor replied. "The Nexaxi kills 95% of everything it hunts. That makes it one of the most successful predators we know about." Taeho frowned but said nothing. He had studied Earth's predators in school, and that number seemed very high. Most hunters on Earth were lucky to catch their prey half the time. Clyde, Professor clicked to the next picture. This time it showed a creature that looked like it was made of ice and shadow. It seemed to fade in and out of sight even in the photograph. "The wraiths of Kethfer are even more deadly," she continued. "They can shift between solid and ghost forms. This lets them walk through walls and surprise their victims. They have wiped out entire colonies by sneaking onto ships." Lissa, a student with blue skin and large black eyes, spoke up. "How do they hunt, Professor?" "They study their prey for days, learning their habits. Then they strike when their target is alone and defenseless. No one has ever survived a wraith attack to tell us exactly how they do it." Again, Taeho felt uncomfortable. The way the professor described it made it sound like the wraiths were perfect killers. But if no one survived their attacks, how did anyone know what they actually did? It didn't make sense. The lesson continued for another hour. Professor Velthar showed them pictures and videos of creatures from dozens of Deathworlds. There was the Void Leviathan, a space whale the size of a building that could survive in the vacuum between stars. There were the hive hunters of Zerion, insects that could melt metal with their acid spit. Each creature was described as nearly perfect at killing. "These Deathworld beasts represent the peak of evolution," the professor said as the class neared its end. "They have been shaped by the harshest environments in the galaxy. That is why they are so much more dangerous than creatures from safer worlds." She looked around the classroom, her 3 eyes focusing on different students. "For next week, each of you will give a presentation about a Deathworld predator. You may choose any creature we discussed today or find a different one to research." The students began packing their things and talking among themselves. Taeho heard Crix talking to some other students nearby. "I wonder what the human will present about," Crix said with a laugh. "Earth isn't even classified as a death world. What kind of dangerous predators could come from such a peaceful planet?" "Maybe he'll talk about those furry creatures with sharp teeth," said Nara Choi, another student. "What did the survey report call them? Dogs?" "Dogs or pets," laughed another student. "How dangerous could they be?" Taeho packed his tablet slowly, listening to their conversation. He wanted to tell them they were wrong about Earth, but he didn't know how to start. How could he explain that Earth was full of predators that were just as dangerous as anything they had seen today? How could he make them understand that the survey reports had missed the most important things about his home planet? As the students filed out of the classroom, Professor Velthar called out to Teho. "Mr. Kim, may I speak with you for a moment?" Teho walked down to the stage where the professor was organizing her notes. "I noticed you seemed troubled during today's lesson," she said. "Is there something about Deathworld predators that concerns you?" Teho thought carefully about his words. "I just think some of the information might be incomplete, Professor." Professor Velthar's three eyes all focused on him at once. "Incomplete? These are well-documented cases studied by xenobiologists for centuries." "I'm sure they are, Professor. It's just that the hunting success rates seem very high compared to what I know about predators." The professor's expression became slightly cold. "Mr. Kim, I understand that as a human you may not have much experience with true predators. Earth is a garden world with relatively gentle creatures. These Deathworld beasts are on a completely different level." Teho felt his face get warm, but he kept his voice calm. "Yes, Professor, I understand. I suggest you use this assignment as a learning experience," she continued. "Perhaps researching a real Deathworld predator will help you understand the difference between Earth's creatures and true apex predators." As Teho walked back to his dormitory, he thought about what to present. The other students expected him to talk about some harmless Earth animal. Professor Velthar clearly thought humans didn't understand real predators. Maybe it was time to show them what Earth was really like. But how could he make them understand without seeming like he was just making things up? How could he prove that the garden world they dismissed was actually more dangerous than any death world they had studied? Teho had 1 week to figure it out. The next week came quickly. Teho sat in his usual seat watching as his classmates gave their presentations. Each student had chosen a different death world predator to research, and each presentation was full of dramatic stories about unstoppable, killing machines. Nara Choi went first. She was a smart student from Kepler Colony, and she had chosen to study the shadow stalkers of Umbros. She clicked through images of black creatures that looked like living darkness with glowing red eyes. "The shadow stalkers can control gravity," Nara explained to the class. "They make themselves lighter to move silently, then make themselves heavier to crush their prey. They hunt in the deep caves of Umbros where no light ever reaches." The class watched videos of the creatures moving through total darkness, somehow able to see their prey perfectly. The videos showed them dropping from cave ceilings onto unsuspecting animals, their gravity powers making the impacts deadly. "How do they find their prey in complete darkness?" asked Lisa. "They can sense the gravitational fields around living creatures," Nara replied. "Nothing can hide from them in their territory." Professor Velthar nodded approvingly. "Excellent research, Miss Choi. The shadow stalkers are indeed perfect ambush predators." Next came Hyunwoo Park, another human student from Mars Colony. He had been at the academy longer than Teho, and seemed more comfortable speaking in front of the alien students. His presentation was about the crystalline hive minds of Zarian Prime. "These creatures are not just individual predators," Hyunwoo explained. "They share one mind across thousands of bodies. Each crystal creature knows what all the others know instantly." He showed videos of the creatures moving in perfect coordination, like they were all parts of one giant organism. When one crystal creature found prey, hundreds of others would appear from nowhere to surround it. "The prey never has a chance," Hyunwoo continued. "The hive mind can predict exactly where the prey will try to run because it controls creatures all around the area." Teho watched the videos and had to admit they were impressive. But something bothered him about the way his classmates talked about these predators. They always focused on the creature's weapons and special abilities, but they never talked about the most important part of hunting, actually catching and killing prey successfully. Finally, it was Crix's turn. The four-armed student walked confidently to the front of the class. His presentation was about void leviathans, and he clearly thought he had chosen the most impressive predator of all. Void leviathans are the ultimate evolution of the hunting instinct, Crix announced. They are larger than most spaceships and can survive in the vacuum of space. They hunt other space-dwelling creatures and even attack small vessels. The images were certainly dramatic. The void leviathans looked like enormous whales with armor plating and tentacles covered in sharp hooks. Videos showed them moving through asteroid fields, grabbing smaller creatures with their tentacles. They have a hunting success rate of 98%, Crick said proudly. They are the most efficient killers in known space. When a void leviathan chooses a target, that target dies. There is no escape. Taiho couldn't help himself. He raised his hand. Yes, Taiho, Professor Velthar said, looking slightly annoyed at the interruption. I was wondering about those success rate numbers, Taiho said carefully. How exactly are they measured? Crix looked confused. What do you mean? Well, how do the researchers count successful hunts versus failed hunts? Do they follow individual leviathans for long periods? Do they count hunts where the prey escapes? How do they know about hunts that happen in deep space where no one can observe them? The classroom became quiet. Crix's forearms gestured uncertainly. The research says 98%. That's what all the sources agree on. But how was that number calculated? Taiho pressed gently. And does it account for environmental factors? For example, if a void leviathan is hunting in an asteroid field, the prey has places to hide. If it's hunting in empty space, the prey has nowhere to go. Those should be very different success rates. Professor Velthar's three eyes all focused on Taiho with a sharp look. Mr. Kim, are you suggesting that centuries of xenobiological research is incorrect? No, Professor, Taiho said quickly. I'm just asking how the measurements were taken. In scientific research, methodology matters as much as results. These are well-established facts, Crix said, sounding defensive. Just because you've never seen a real predator doesn't mean you can question documented science. Actually, Taiho continued, trying to keep his voice calm, the hunting strategies described don't seem very effective against intelligent prey. The void leviathans rely on size and strength, but smart prey would use tactics to avoid direct confrontation. The alien students began murmuring among themselves. Some looked annoyed that a human was questioning their research. Others seemed curious about Taiho's points. Miraseo, a kind student with pale blue skin, tried to smooth things over. Maybe different types of predators work better in different situations, she suggested. Taiho might have a point about methodology, and Crix is certainly right about the impressive abilities of void leviathans. But the damage was done. Taiho could see that most of his classmates now thought he was being difficult. They whispered to each other, and he caught words like presumptuous and inexperienced. Professor Velthar looked at her notes, then back at Taiho. Since you seem to have strong opinions about predator efficiency, Mr. Kim, you will present next week. I'm very curious to see what Earth has taught you about true predation. Her voice was cold and skeptical. It was clear she expected him to embarrass himself. Yes, Professor, Taiho replied. As the class ended and students gathered their things, Taiho heard more whispered conversations around him. Can you believe he questioned Crix's research? Humans think they know everything just because they joined the galactic community. What could Earth possibly teach us about dangerous predators? His planet doesn't even have any real Deathworld creatures. Yunwoo Park walked over to Taiho as they left the classroom. You sure you want to do this? He asked quietly. They're all expecting you to fail now. I know, Taiho replied, but someone needs to point out that their information is incomplete. What are you going to present about? Taiho thought for a moment. I'm not sure yet, but I think it's time they learned what Earth is really like. As he walked back to his dormitory, Taiho realized he had put himself in a difficult position. The entire class would be watching next week, expecting him to prove that Earth's creatures could match the galaxy's most feared predators. But maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. Maybe it was time for the Galactic Academy to learn that they had been studying predators all wrong. Maybe it was time to show them what a real apex predator looked like. The problem was Taiho wasn't sure they were ready for the truth about Earth. The amphitheater was more crowded than Taiho had ever seen it. Word had spread throughout the academy about the human student who had dared to question established xenobiological doctrine. Students from other departments filled the extra seats, all eager to watch what they expected to be an embarrassing display. Taeho walked down to the presentation stage, carrying only a simple data tablet. Behind him, the massive display screen waited for his presentation. He could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him, most of them expecting him to fail. Professor Velthar sat in the front row, her three eyes fixed on him with obvious skepticism. Craig sat nearby with his forearms crossed, still angry about having his research questioned. Even students who had been friendly to Taeho looked doubtful. "Mr. Kim," Professor Velthar announced to the crowd, "will be presenting on predators from his homeworld of Earth. I'm sure we're all curious to see what a garden world can teach us about apex predation." Her tone made it clear she didn't expect to learn anything useful. Several students chuckled quietly. Taeho connected his tablet to the presentation system and looked out at the audience. His heart was beating fast, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "I want to talk to you about persistence hunting and pack coordination in Terran apex predators," he began simply. The first image appeared on the screen behind him. It showed a group of gray and brown animals that looked somewhat like dogs but wilder and more muscular. "These are wolves," Taeho explained. "They live in family groups called packs, usually 8 to 12 individuals. At first glance, they might not seem impressive compared to the creatures you've been studying." Indeed, several alien students looked confused. The wolves looked small and ordinary compared to crystal-spined Nexaxi or phase-shifting wraiths. "But let me show you how they hunt," Taeho continued, clicking to a video. The video showed a pack of wolves moving through a snowy forest. They moved, silently, communicating with subtle body language. Ahead of them, a large deer grazed peacefully, unaware of the danger approaching. "Watch how they coordinate," Taeho said as the wolves spread out around their target. Each wolf knows exactly where the others are without any sound or obvious signals. They've done this so many times that they can predict each other's movements perfectly. The wolves attacked suddenly, but not all at once. Some wolves drove the deer toward others who were waiting in ambush. When the deer tried to escape in one direction, wolves appeared to block its path. When it turned another way, more wolves were ready. "The deer is faster than any single wolf," Taeho explained as the chase continued. "But the wolves don't need to be faster. They just need to be smarter." What followed was not a quick kill like the alien students expected. Instead, it was a long, methodical hunt that lasted hours. The wolves took turns chasing the deer, always keeping it moving, never letting it rest. "This is persistence hunting," Taeho said. "They don't rely on special abilities or superior strength. They use endurance and coordination to exhaust their prey." Jinwoo Lee, a Martian engineering student, leaned forward and began taking notes. He seemed to understand something that the others were missing. The video showed the deer growing tired, its movements becoming slower and less coordinated. The wolves, meanwhile, took turns resting while others continued the pursuit. By the end, the deer could barely run, and the wolves finished it quickly and efficiently. "The success rate for wolf pack hunts is about 30%, Taeho said. "That might seem low compared to the numbers you've heard for other predators. But here's what makes it interesting." He clicked to the next slide, which showed hunting statistics. Wolves can attempt multiple hunts per day. They can hunt in any weather and any terrain their prey can survive in. They adapt their tactics based on the prey species, the environment, and even individual prey behavior. Most importantly, they learn from every hunt, successful or failed. Some of the alien students began to look interested despite themselves. This was different from the simple, overwhelming force approach they had studied in other predators. "Now let me show you something even more impressive," Taeho said, bringing up images of black and white marine creatures. "These are orcas, also called killer whales. They live in Earth's oceans and are considered one of our planet's most intelligent predators." The videos that followed amazed the audience. Orcas working together to create waves that washed seals off ice floes. Orcas teaching their young complex hunting techniques that took years to master. Orcas that had learned to steal fish from human fishing lines without getting caught. "Each orca family has its own hunting traditions," Taeho explained. "Techniques passed down from parents to children for generations. Some orcas specialize in hunting sharks. Others hunt whales much larger than themselves. They have different languages, different cultures, different approaches to solving problems." Soo Young Han, a xenopsychology student, raised her hand. "You're talking about culture in non-sapient species. How is that possible?" "That's exactly the point," Tejo replied. "Intelligence and culture aren't limited to sapient species on Earth. Many of our predators show complex problem-solving abilities, social learning, and even individual personalities." He showed more examples. Crocodiles that learn to use sticks as bait to catch birds. Ravens that could solve multi-step puzzles and teach the solutions to other ravens. Octopi that could plan hunting strategies several steps in advance. "But the most successful persistence hunters on Earth," Tejo said, pausing as he brought up the final set of images, "were early humans." The images showed human ancestors running across African plains, carrying simple spears and working in small groups. Humans became the apex predator on Earth not through strength, speed, or special abilities, Tejo continued. They did it through persistence, intelligence, and the ability to think like their prey. He showed reconstruction videos of early human hunts, small groups of humans tracking large animals for days, studying their behavior, predicting where they would go. Humans who could run for hours without stopping, who could track prey across any terrain, who could work together to drive massive animals toward traps or cliffs. Humans could hunt anything on Earth that they wanted to hunt. Tejo said simply, any environment, any prey species, any situation. They did it by being smarter than their prey and more determined than their prey. The amphitheater had gone completely silent. Students who had been expecting to laugh at primitive Earth creatures were now staring at the screen with new understanding. The success rate for human persistence hunting was around 50%, Tejo concluded. But humans could attempt hunts in situations where other predators couldn't even try. They could hunt prey much larger than themselves, prey that was faster than them, prey that was stronger than them. They did it by being the most adaptable and persistent predators their planet had ever seen. He looked out at the audience one final time. Earth wasn't classified as a death world because the survey team studied the wrong species. They looked at the prey animals and assumed they were the dominant life forms. They never realized that Earth's true apex predator was the species that was doing the studying. The silence that followed was deafening. Professor Velthar's three eyes were wider than Tejo had ever seen them. Students throughout the amphitheater sat frozen, trying to process what they had just learned. Finally, Crix raised one of his four hands with a shaking gesture. "Are you saying," he asked slowly, "that humans are predators?" Tejo looked at him, calmly. "I'm saying that humans became the most successful predators on Earth by learning to think instead of just hunt. And then we learned to do something even more remarkable. We learned to stop hunting and start protecting instead." The implications of his words settled over the audience like a heavy blanket. They had been studying the galaxy's most dangerous predators for weeks, never realizing that one of those predators was sitting in their classroom the entire time. Professor Velthar called an emergency faculty meeting within an hour of Tejo's presentation ending. The news spread quickly through the Academy's communication networks, and soon every department was buzzing with worried conversations. In the main faculty conference room, xenobiology professors from across the galaxy gathered around a large circular table. The room's walls displayed data streams from the Academy's central computers, all showing the same troubling information. "The human's analysis is mathematically sound," reported Dr. Kent, the Academy's head of computational biology. His tentacles moved nervously as he gestured at the floating data displays. "When we apply proper statistical models to predator success rates, Earth's apex predators consistently outperform what we've classified as death world species." Professor Velthar felt a cold sensation in her stomach. "How is that possible?" "Our data has been verified by researchers for centuries." "That's the problem," Dr. Kent replied. "Our data was never wrong, but our interpretation was incomplete. We measured peak performance under ideal conditions, not average performance across varied environments. Earth's predators might have lower maximum success rates, but they maintain higher average success rates because they can adapt to any situation." Meanwhile, the Academy's administration contacted Earth's diplomatic corps. Within hours, Do-Hyun Chang, the human cultural attaché, arrived via emergency transport. He was a calm man in his 50s who had spent decades helping alien species understand human culture. The emergency briefing took place in the Academy's main conference hall. Alien faculty members, government representatives, and military observers filled the seats. Do-hyun stood at the center, looking slightly amused by all the concerned faces around him. Ambassador Chang, Professor Velthar began, "We need to understand how Earth was classified incorrectly. Our xenobiology department is in crisis." Do-hyun nodded thoughtfully. The classification error happened during first contact about 40 years ago. The survey team spent most of their time studying Earth's large herbivores, elephants, whales, dinosaur fossils. They assumed these were Earth's dominant species because they were the biggest and most visible. But surely they encountered humans during their survey? Oh, they did, Do-hyun replied with a slight smile. They met farmers, researchers, diplomats, children playing in parks. Humans were friendly, curious, and helpful. The survey team concluded that humans were a peaceful species that had somehow survived on a planet full of dangerous animals. A Zentari military observer leaned forward. They didn't realize that humans were predators? How could they? Do-hyun asked. The humans they met were teachers, scientists, and ambassadors. They saw humans growing food instead of hunting it, protecting animals instead of killing them, building cities instead of stalking through forests. It never occurred to them that these peaceful beings had once been persistence hunters who could track and kill anything on their planet. Back in the student dormitories, the aftermath of Taiho's presentation was causing its own chaos. Alien. Students gathered in small groups, their conversations filled with anxiety and confusion. Crix paced back and forth in the common area, his four arms gesturing wildly as he talked to a group of other students. "We've been sitting next to apex predators for months," he said, his voice high with stress. "How many humans are there at this academy? How many are there in the galaxy?" "Calm down," Mirasio said gently. Taiho said humans learned to stop hunting. "They're not dangerous anymore." "But they could be," Crix insisted. "If they wanted to be. If they chose to be." Yoonji Yoon, a human diplomatic student, tried to explain the situation to a group of concerned aliens. She had arrived at the academy just a few days after Taiho and had watched the entire controversy unfold. "Humans don't see ourselves as predators," she said patiently. "We see ourselves as gardeners, explorers, builders. Yes, we evolved from hunters, but we've moved beyond that. We use those same instincts to protect things now instead of hunting them. But the capability is still there," pointed out Lisa, the blue-skinned student who had always been one of the more analytical members of the class. "Yes," Yoonji admitted. "The capability is still there. But so is the choice not to use it." The conversation was interrupted when Minho Jang arrived at the dormitory. He was a human military officer who had been studying xenology at the academy as part of an exchange program. His presence made some of the alien students even more nervous. Minho was tall and muscular with scars on his hands that suggested he had seen combat. Unlike Taeho and Yoonji, who looked like typical students, Minho clearly looked like someone who could be dangerous if he chose to be. "I heard there was some excitement about human predatory instincts," he said with a friendly smile that didn't entirely hide the sharpness in his eyes. The alien students suddenly became very quiet. Minho noticed their discomfort and sat down slowly, making sure his movements were calm and non-threatening. "You know," he said conversationally, "Taiho was right about humans being persistence hunters, but he left out some important details." "Like what?" Lisa asked carefully. "Like the fact that we didn't just hunt animals," Minho replied. "When humans ran out of animals to hunt, we started hunting each other. We got very, very good at it. We developed strategies and weapons and tactics that were specifically designed to outsmart other human beings." The silence in the room was deafening, but Minho continued. "We also got very good at something else. We got good at choosing not to hunt. We learned to recognize that our greatest strength wasn't in our ability to kill, but in our ability to protect and build and create." Meanwhile, the Academy's AI systems were busy correlating data from human space. The results were not comforting to the alien faculty members who reviewed them. The data showed patterns that painted a clear picture. Wherever humans had established colonies, local extinction rates initially spiked dramatically before dropping to nearly zero. The pattern suggested that humans quickly eliminated anything they considered threatening, then switched to protecting everything else. Even more concerning were the military records. Human conflicts throughout history showed tactical innovations that were specifically designed to counter every possible defense. Humans didn't just learn to hunt animals. They had spent thousands of years learning to hunt the most dangerous prey of all, other humans who were just as smart and just as determined. Dr. Kent presented his final analysis to the emergency faculty, meeting as the day drew to a close. Based on the available data, he said, his tentacles barely moving from exhaustion, humans represent the most efficient and adaptable predatory species we have ever encountered. They have the ability to analyze, predict, and counter virtually any defense or evasion strategy. But they've chosen not to use these abilities aggressively, Professor Velthar observed. Correct. In fact, they appear to have redirected their predatory instincts toward exploration, problem-solving, and protection of other species. It's as if they've become predators of problems rather than predators of prey. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy's newest member, species, wasn't just another civilization to welcome into the galactic community. They were the most dangerous species anyone had ever encountered, and they had chosen to use their abilities to help rather than harm. The question now was whether that choice would continue, and whether the rest of the galaxy could learn to coexist with predators who had evolved beyond predation. As night fell over the academy, students and faculty alike lay awake thinking about the same troubling question. What did it mean when the galaxy's most effective killers were also its most committed protectors? 3 days after Taiho's presentation, Professor Velthar stood before her xenobiology class once again. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. The casual confidence that had filled the room during previous lessons was gone, replaced by careful attention and respectful curiosity. The class size had doubled. Students from other departments continued to attend, and several faculty members sat in the back rows as observers. Everyone wanted to understand what they had missed about predators, about humans, and about the nature of intelligence itself. Today we will not be studying Deathworld beasts, Professor Velthar announced. Today we will be discussing what it means to evolve beyond your evolutionary programming. She looked around the room, her 3 eyes focusing on different students. We have learned that our understanding of predation was fundamentally flawed. We focused on physical capabilities and forgot about the most important aspect of any predator, the mind. A new voice joined the conversation via hologram projection. Seojin Lim appeared as a shimmering blue figure near the front of the classroom. She was a human philosopher who studied at the academy remotely from Earth, and her calm presence seemed to ease some of the tension in the room. The question you're all struggling with, Seojin said gently, is how to reconcile humanity's predatory past with our current behavior. You want to know if we can be trusted? If our peaceful nature is real or just a disguise? Crix, who had been quiet since Taiho's presentation, finally spoke up. How do we know you won't change your minds? How do we know you won't decide to start hunting again? Because, Seojin replied, we learned something that most predators never learn. We learned that the greatest challenge isn't hunting your prey. It's choosing not to hunt when you could. She gestured, and the hologram display showed images of Earth in the present day. Cities full of humans living alongside carefully protected wilderness areas. Humans working to restore extinct species. Humans exploring space not to conquer it but to understand it. Evolution taught us to hunt, Seojin continued. But intelligence taught us to choose. The same persistence that made us effective predators now makes us effective protectors. The same adaptability that let us hunt anything now lets us preserve everything. Taiho, who had been sitting quietly through the discussion, raised his hand. May I add something? Professor Velthar nodded. Please do, Mr. Kim. Taiho stood up and looked around the room at his classmates. I think you're still missing the most important point, he said. You're trying to figure out whether humans are dangerous or safe, but that's the wrong question. What's the right question? Asked Yuna Kim, a terraforming student who had been taking careful notes. The right question is, what happens when a species becomes smart enough to choose its own evolution? The room fell silent as students considered this idea. Humans didn't just evolve past being predators, Taiho continued. We evolved past being controlled by our evolution. We looked at our own instincts and decided which ones to keep, which ones to modify, and which ones to abandon entirely. Jiwan, oh, a xenosociology student, leaned forward with interest. You're saying humans consciously directed their own development? In a way, yes, Taiho replied. We kept the persistence and adaptability that made us good hunters. We kept the pack coordination and strategic thinking, but we chose to aim those abilities at problems instead of prey. Seojin's hologram nodded approvingly. This is why humans become explorers, scientists, and protectors. We're still persistence hunters, but now we hunt knowledge, solutions, and threats to the things we care about. Minho Zhang, the military officer, had been sitting quietly in the back of the room. Now he stood up and walked to the front of the class. I'd like to address the elephant in the room, he said. Yes, humans are still capable of violence. Yes, we still have military forces and weapons. But let me explain how human military thinking has evolved. He activated his own data tablet and displayed tactical information on the main screen. Modern human military doctrine is called protective aggression, he explained. We don't train soldiers to hunt enemies. We train them to hunt threats to the things we protect. Our military exists to eliminate dangers to peace, not to conquer territory or destroy other species. Lisa raised her hand. But surely you must have conflicts with other human groups? We do, Minho admitted. But even our conflicts with each other follow protective principles. We fight to protect ideas, territories, or people, not to hunt and destroy opponents. The goal is always to neutralize threats while minimizing harm. That's a very fine distinction, observed Dr. Kempf, one of the faculty observers. It's the most important distinction, Minho replied. A hunter kills to eat. A protector kills only to prevent greater killing. The mindset is completely different, and it leads to completely different outcomes. The discussion continued for hours, with students and faculty asking questions about human psychology, human history, and human intentions. Gradually, a new understanding began to emerge. Humans weren't just another predatory species that had learned to control its instincts. They were something new, a species that had consciously chosen to evolve beyond their evolutionary programming. They had kept the abilities that served them while discarding the drives that didn't. This changes everything, Professor Velthar said finally. Not just our understanding of humans, but our understanding of what evolution can become. If one species can consciously direct its own development, others might be able to do the same. That's exactly right, Seojin said from her hologram projection. Humans aren't unique because we're predators. We're unique because we're predators who learn to choose our prey. And we chose to prey on ignorance, suffering, and extinction, rather than on other living beings. As the session neared its end, Professor Velthar made an announcement that surprised everyone. The Xenobiology department is restructuring this course, she said. We will no longer study Deathworld beasts as simple killing machines. Instead, we will study how different species have evolved past their survival programming. We will look at cooperation, intelligence, and conscious choice as evolutionary strategies. She looked directly at Taiho. Mr. Kim, I would like you to help design the new curriculum. Your species has clearly mastered something that we need to understand better. Taiho felt overwhelmed but nodded his acceptance. Additionally, the professor continued, the Academy is establishing a new exchange program. We want more humans in our classrooms, not as curiosities but as teachers. If we're going to understand conscious evolution, we need to learn from the species that has gone furthest down that path. The students began to file out of the classroom, but the conversations continued in the hallways and dormitories. The fear and suspicion that had followed Taiho's presentation was gradually being replaced by curiosity and respect. Crix approached Taiho as they walked toward the dormitories. I owe you an apology, he said with his four-armed version of a bow. I was wrong to dismiss your questions about our research. You don't need to apologize, Taiho replied. You were working with the information you had. We all were. But you saw what we missed, Crix insisted. You understood something about predation that we completely ignored. Taiho thought for a moment. Maybe that's because I'm looking at it from the inside, he said. It's easier to understand predatory thinking when you're a predator yourself. As they walked, other students joined the conversation. Soon there was a group of both humans and aliens discussing the implications of conscious evolution, the nature of choice, and the possibility that other species might be able to learn from humanity's example. Professor Velthar watched them go, then turned to update her lesson notes. At the top of the page she wrote, Lesson 1. The most successful predator is the one that learns to choose its prey. The most successful species is the one that learns to choose its own evolution. Below that she added, Note, humans are not the galaxy's most dangerous predators because they are the most effective killers. They are the galaxy's most dangerous predators because they are the most effective choosers. The Academy had learned something that would change galactic understanding forever. The difference between a beast that kills by instinct and a being that chooses when, how, and why to use its abilities. And they had learned it from the quiet student who had simply wanted to correct some inaccurate statistics. As night fell over the Academy, the future seemed brighter and more complex than anyone had imagined. The galaxy had gained not just a new member species but a new teacher, one that could show other civilizations how to consciously direct their own evolution toward something better than their origins had intended.